Hello guys, Sherifa here. Now I'll show you how the basics of using Godot 4's physics server. So here I have a bunch of cubes. I think it will go up to 1800, and I'm using the rendering server to draw the cubes, and shapes you can't see and the debug doesn't show it, so we'll just skip that for now. So what we'll need to do, first we'll need to create a body using the physics server. Then we need to set its space, that is the world that it exists in. Then we need to give it a shape, and then we need to set its initial transform. And then for rendering, same as the first video, we need to create an instance, then set its scenario, give it a shape, a mesh, and then set its transform. And then every physics frame, using the physics process, we set its transform. So let's get into that. Okay, so here we have a blank scene. I just have a CSG box here, and I had collisions on, and a camera to move around, and a bunch of setup, and then label for the frames per second. So let's go on the single object node and check this out. Alright, so what will we need? First we'll need an object. This will be the RID for the physics. Oops, lowercase object. We'll need a mesh, so let's call this mesh. And then we'll need another shape, the shape for the collision, or box shape I should say, shape 3D. And we need a mesh, so say onReady again, var or box mesh. Okay, starting off with the physics server, PS, get a reference to it, that's the shorten it. And we say object dot physics server dot body create. We say body create, we say physics server body set space, and we get the object, and then we get the current world, the world 3D, and space. Remember, we get this function from this node. Now we say body add shape object, and then set that shape. So object shape, BG shape, and we need to set its shape transform. So object at 0. So collision object can have multiple collision shape. So we get an index 0. This is the one shape that we added. Then we're just setting its default transform to be all zeros. Basis identity, and then position 0. Vector 3 0. Then we create a transform. Say transform 3D. Use identity again. Basis, or just say transform 3D dot identity. And in order to set different values for the object, you need to use body set state. The object, then we could set any of these. We could tell it if it can sleep. If you want to set its angular velocity, you could set its linear velocity. You could tell it as if it's sleeping or transform. You could set it to sleep. So right now we need to set its transform. Let's set it to trans, and that should be it for that. So now we won't be able to see anything happening, so we need to actually set the render. So let's say var rs render server, rendering server. I had a video already on this. You guys could go back on it and look at it. So let's quickly just go here. Let's say mesh.rs create 2. Create 2 actually takes 2 parameters. Takes both the box mesh, like the mesh that it requires, mesh shape, and the world. So get world, the world scenario, the world 3D, that scenario. So this is a shorthand for the way I did it previously. So we could say instance at transform, set transform, and set it to that same transform that we made previously. That's right here. Remember, we need to set it to be mesh. And that's it for the initial setup. So now we could run it. We'll get that being on the floor, but we don't need that. So let's go back here and look for transform. Actually create that. Could say basis dot identity here. Then we could say vector 3 here. Vector 3 dot 0. Put y on 5 and then 0 again. And now here it is, but the actual physics object is actually on the floor right here, but you can't see it because we weren't updating that. So let's do that now. So let's go back here and let's use the physics process. There you go. So now what we need to do is get a reference from this object. We're gonna use state, and then we get its transform, and then apply that transform to the mesh. Pretty straightforward. So let's say var trans equal physics server 3D, and we could say body dot get state. Let's get that object reference, and then we want its transform, body state transform. And we now need the rendering server, and we could say instance mesh, and then pass a transform to it, and that should be it. Now we could run this scene. There you go. Don't know why my camera is all over the place, but not that interesting. So let me create a sphere, and then we could see something happen. So I'll do that off camera. Let's do it here. Alright, and that should do it. So here I'm creating a new object, and then updating it here. Same thing as before, but this time I'm using a mesh. So I create a new object, object 2, and mesh 2. Now I could run it. There you go. And that should be it for this tutorial. So that should be it. If you want to see how I did it with the whole bunch that I had over here, what I basically did was create a 2D array. So create this array here, and then after I create one, I append a new array and pass in both objects here, and then now I'm looping through them here. So I have a removal key just for removing the ones that fall off the box. So you can't remove anything from an array while you're running through it. So here I loop through it, and then object 0 is the physics body, and then 1 is the mesh body. So the render server deals with index 1 and server deals with index 0. That's basically how I do it. Then I remove them if they're below 10, negative 10, and that should be it. And this is all the countdown setup stuff that I have. And whenever you exit the tree, remember to remove them. So I have to remove both. And I still didn't do that here either. So let's do that. Exit 3. Say render server .free already. Mesh and mesh 2. And physics server. PS3 already as well. Object 2. Alright, that should be it. That's it for the most part. Alright guys, take care and have a good one. Like and subscribe.